We're gonna have the biggest, most beautiful bill, he said. And it's gonna be a giant, beautiful monster. And on July 4th, 2025, ironically, on our nation's Independence Day, that monster was born. It was sold as a historic tax cut for many American working class. A bill that would give you, the everyday American, more money in your pocket with no taxes on tips or overtime, and deductions for the very cars that you drive. But what if the big beautiful bill wasn't so beautiful after all? What if for all the headlines and catchy promises, it's a bill that will leave most Americans worse off, while quietly restructuring the very fabric of our social safety net? Today, we're going to unpack the big beautiful bill and dig deeper under the rhetoric to see whether or not this bill is actually good for Americans or if it would be detrimental to our country. All right, so let's start with the thing that everyone's talking about, the no tax on tips. This has been a huge talking point. It's a deduction, remember, a deduction, not an elimination of the income of the wages that you earn through tips. It's still significant, don't get me wrong. And the same goes for overtime. If you're an hourly worker, a chunk of that extra pay will not be taxed. And that's a huge deal, right? Then there's the car loan interest deduction. Now, unlike before, you can deduct the interest that you pay on your vehicles when you buy them with financing, just like you do with the house. But now you can deduct your car interest. These things are the public working class items on the face of the bill. But what about the monster part? The part that I want to dig deeper into. What does that look like? The core of the bill is actually about making the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017 permanent, many of the provisions permanent. If you don't remember, that was a bill that was also passed by Donald Trump and his administration for a bunch of tax cuts. And this bill primarily is to make a lot of those provisions back then permanent, as well as add some additional tax cuts. Yeah, and it also extends major corporate and business tax breaks, like allowing companies to immediately deduct R&D costs. All of this is designed to stimulate the economy from the top down, and supporters say it will do just that. You might remember the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017. It is when the one major thing that happened there was the corporate tax rate was cut down from 35% to 21%. The corporate cuts were permanent, but for the individuals, those cuts were actually temporary. The individual tax cuts were set to expire at the end of 2025. That means in 2026, Americans' tax rates and the taxes they will pay would then increase back to how it was before the bill passed. The big beautiful bill changes all that. Obviously, the cuts from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are no longer temporary, they're now made permanent. This is a huge deal. It's the core underlying purpose of the bill for a lot of its supporters. For them, the bill is about preventing a massive tax hike and giving families and businesses the long-term tax certainty that they need. It also permanently eliminates the personal exemption. Remember what that was? It was a key part of the tax code before 2017. For many taxpayers, the bigger standard deduction from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act makes up more of the loss of the personal exemption. And by eliminating it, it simplifies the tax code for the millions of Americans that file taxes each year. So I guess you could say for its supporters, it's a win-win. They get to keep the popular tax cuts from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and deliver on the promises for more money for the working class. But the permanence comes at a cost, and it's a big one. These bills and tax cuts don't just appear out of thin air, like they have to be paid somehow, right? And this is where the picture gets a little less beautiful. To offset the trillions in tax cuts, the bill makes unprecedented cuts to some of America's most critical social programs. We're talking about Medicaid, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and Medicare. And how did they do this? Well, there's a few ways. One is by imposing new work requirements for able-bodied adults, and another is by requiring states to check eligibility more often, which studies show often leads to people losing coverage even if they still qualify. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, ran the numbers, and their analysis is sobering. They project that millions of Americans will lose health coverage under this bill, and that's not all. The bill also shifts federal spending to other priorities, a massive investment in border security, a new push for domestic oil and gas, and new tax policies that, according to some analysis, will actually leave the vast majority of Americans with less after-tax income once you factor everything in. So how can both of these things be true? I mean, how can it be the biggest tax cut for the middle class and a bill that would leave most Americans worse off? The answer is, like most things in politics, it is in the fine print. The new temporary tax deductions, the tips, the overtime, cars, are popular. They're almost set to expire, but they're also set to expire in a few years. And meanwhile, the cuts to social programs are often permanent or have a long-term lasting effect. The other key is what the bill doesn't do. It doesn't pay down the debt. In fact, most analysis project it would add trillions to it. Remember, our national debt's already in the tens of trillions of dollars. This will add more to that debt, even with the spending cuts. And why is that? And it's because the permanent tax cuts, especially for businesses, are incredibly expensive. So it's a game of trade-offs. You get a little more money on your paycheck now, but you might lose access to critical health care later. You get tax breaks, but the country's debt swells. You get a bill with a beautiful name, but its effects are far more complex, and for a lot of people, a lot less beautiful. So one last thing to remember here is that the big beautiful bill is not just a tax policy. It's a statement about what we value as a country. It's a bet on who drives the economy. Is it the working class, or is it the upper echelon? I think that this bill firmly puts its chips on one side. Although, as I said before, this bill may be good in the short term for many Americans. With your tax cuts, you get to keep more of your money in through taxes. But in the end, in the long term, it might be more expensive. We see what's going on with tariffs. We see what's going on with the social program cuts. In the long run, the cost of living might increase for Americans, and then you will keep less of your money in your own pockets. The truth is, its long-term impacts won't be known for years. But now the debate rages on. So the next time you hear a politician promise something big and beautiful, you might just think to yourself, is it really? What is being hidden here? What are they trying to distract us from? And that's something to keep in mind for the future.